Good morning. How's everyone doing surviving day 2? So far, so good. I'm lucky I get to actually present before the party. Last couple times I've done these things, so it's like, hey, James, you get the 9 a.m. Friday slot. Yay! That's fun. Well, welcome to, this is the Windows Server 2012 PowerShell crash course. My name is James. I am a Microsoft certified trainer who works for Old House. I don't know, I saw a few familiar faces. I think maybe some of you have been there, visited us, done some training with us. Yay, thank you. We're always grateful for that. Like I said, we're here to have a look and have a talk and look at some of the new features in PowerShell version 3. I'm going to use Windows Server 2012 for the demos. I will warn you, this is a bit of a demo-heavy course, or a demo-heavy talk. I know that's going to excite all of you. Think, ooh, so we're going to watch some guy type commands. Yay! Yeah, woohoo! Yeah. So, and the fact that this may be here means either way, A, you're A, really excited about PowerShell, or B, you really are geeky. And I fall into that category. I will fully admit that, One of the those first things when Server 2012 came out, I went, oh, PowerShell version 3, awesome. My coworkers looked at me like, what is he on? The fact that you're here, and we're going to talk about this. Now, one of the things, obviously, just make sure that set some expectations for this, just so you know why we're here, realistically. We're looking at the new features of PowerShell. I'm not going to try to go look at every single bit and piece and object in there. I've kind of tried to pick out a few key areas that I think are important that relate to kind of the things that I think most people, struggle with. Just out of curiosity, who here would kind of self-identify themselves as a PowerShell expert or a PowerShell guru? All right, no, that's right. Who here would identify themselves as, I hate PowerShell, I will use it under duress? All right, no, that's honest, that's all right, Who here says, don't really know too much about it, but, well, it's on the server track, and I heard they were giving away laptops. Yeah, that's what I thought. So, again, I have no problem with honesty. So, again, we are going to look at this through, I will warn you, the VMs that I'm using are release candidates, seeing as how I was not going to build new ones for a presentation in front of a few hundred people the day before my presentation. Sorry. But that's what we're going to look at here. The reality is I'm going to be looking at basic code to make our points, okay? I'm not trying to turn you into PowerShell experts in an hour. Wouldn't happen. Okay, we're trying to look at some of the new features. I'm not going to be building these insanely complex scripts, all this kind of stuff. You're going to see me using a command called get process a lot. Even for those of you who are not big PowerShell experts, you can probably figure out what a command called get process does, right? Hopefully, just because that's not the point. We're not trying to look at all this stuff. But I am assuming a somewhat basic understanding of PowerShell. Okay. So, again, I'm not trying to teach you all there is to know about PowerShell, how to build good syntax and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to be explaining every little bit and piece like that. So, if you're saying, oh, I really want to learn how to drive PowerShell or how to use PowerShell, sorry. We are going to look at some new features, but I'll try to keep it simple, but I'm not trying to show you every in and out of how to do PowerShell. Okay? So those are my expectations, realistically. And hopefully that matches yours. Like I said, I thought I can either talk about PowerShell or I can at least try to do some of these things realistically, and so you can get a bit of a feel for that and what's involved. And so hopefully you're going to find that it's not too bad. Now, like I was mentioning before, I just said, how many of you self-identify as gurus? Not too many. How many said, I will use it under duress? How many of you, I would imagine, hopefully most would say, I've used it, I've had to use it, I've had to use PowerShell for bits and pieces, I look it up in the TechEd article or whatever, some documentation, type this command, I did that, it worked. It can make the minor switches. Would that be a fair whack of you? Yeah. And so, fair enough, and that's a lot of people, a lot of administrators. We're finding ourselves needing to do that more and more. That's what I find. I kind of came to PowerShell I was someone who was writing all the VB scripts for the company I was working for. So when PowerShell came out, okay, hey, you're the scripting guy. Here, go do that. And I think of it that way. And I'll fully admit, I spend time. If I can write a script that will automate something, I will, within reason. Sometimes that's good things. The reality is I work for a training company. Every Friday night, I have to sit there and figure out how do I deploy, depending on, anywhere between 4 and 100 virtual machines. And I have to register them and import them and make sure they're working. I can do that one at a time, but I'd also like to get home and see my family sometime during the weekend. So I look at those things, absolutely. I'm not big Mr. Developer guy. I know some PowerShell guys, they're kind of ex-developers, and that's fine, and that's really good, and people do that. I'm an IT administrator. I'm an IT pro. I manage servers, with Exchange servers, Link servers, Windows servers, whatever it is, and I use PowerShell. Now, PowerShell 2.0, that's what we've had up till now. Very, very useful. Not going to say it's not. I'm not going to denigrate it and run it down. Oh, it's horrible. It's crap. No, very, really useful. Great. But having said that, there were some pain points. At least I thought so. And if you guys are here, I'm assuming some of you thought so as well. For you guys, what were some of those pain points? Anyone? Well, something you would have liked to see change, or something that you do find annoying, a pain in the butt about PowerShell? The error messages, all right? The fact that they are somewhat less than clear at times? Didn't fix that. Sorry. All right, but hey, no, fair enough, pain point. All right, any other ones? Declaring variables, yep. That's they've made some of that easier, to be honest. That's one of the things they have looked at. So some of that kind of thing. Commandlets and some of the syntax issues, I think some of that. I'll be honest, it doesn't entirely go away, PowerShell 3. And it depends what you want to do. If you want to get complex, you're going to have to do some of that stuff. I'm not going to lie to you. But they have tried to make it a little bit simpler for the simpler tasks. Yeah. Anything else? What else? Sorry, didn't quite catch that. Yeah, redirection. Yep. All right, I said, yep, simplifying output, not so easy in PowerShell. I'd say that's probably fair. You have to know a few commands. Not too bad, but yeah, you could just pipeline or you could just pipe it, but do a few things. Yeah, it's probably fair enough. I'd agree with that. Anything else? Yeah. Remote connectivity. Yep. Great idea, isn't it? And when you can get it to work, useful? Everyone who here has to do the remote connectivity stuff with PowerShell? Would you agree? When you can get it to work, it's very useful and handy? Pain in the butt to get it to work? Yeah, and that's one of the things in here. They've put some work in here. Try to fix that. I don't know if fix is maybe strong, but try to make that a little bit easier. Try to expand that a little bit on some of those things. So that's another thing. I'd say scripting, that goes along with what it is. Some of the tools we have for this. These are all things. The scripting tools we have. The reality is, if you are spending any time with writing scripts in PowerShell, the reality is you are probably not using the built-in script editing tools that Microsoft gives you. Would you say that's a fair statement? Yeah, I would. Yeah, I'm thinking, obviously, and what are the tools? Well, Notepad. Yay! There's some visual Notepad. Thanks. It sounds so much cooler than that way. There is the script editor, the ISE. Better than Notepad? Yeah, but it is lacking some stuff. I see, and like I said, these are kind of the 6 kind of pain points that I have found, and every one of us is different. I know, who was the gentleman that said variables and dealing with variables? That was who's back there? Is that you back there? Here, have a hat. I'd agree with that. Pass that. Get that back to him. Fortunately, they're not pointy end and trying to match it. But I know. So yeah, fair enough. Me personally, not a pain point. I'll fully admit that. Why? Because I came from a VB background, doing some VB scripting, variable. Oh, okay, whatever, great, not a problem. But you know what? Every one of us is different. So these are the things that I think bug a lot of people and try to get a wide range. One is the commandlets, syntax, simplifying that, braces and quotation marks, and when do I have to use this, and when do I use quotes, and some of that stuff, and how do I filter things out? Big pain in the butt, potentially. It's one of those things I find. Once you kind of get your head around it and you know what to do, you don't really think about it too much. But again, especially if you're the kind of what I like to call the casual PowerShell user, I'll be honest, this causes you some grief. So some of the syntax. Object management. And to me, this relates to commandlets as well. Anyone here ever tried to manage like their DHCP servers using PowerShell? How much time did you spend on that trying to figure out the WMI object? Yeah, exactly. And that's one of those things. So that's one of the things that they've done in here. They've tried to make object management a lot easier. And we'll talk about these topics. One of the ways they have done that is, because it kind of relates back to the commandlets, is they've just added a lot more native commandlets. You know, instead of, because that was one of the biggest problems. For the things they had commandlets for, it was okay. And if there weren't, then you're either using these generic object management methods, or maybe then you're, who here's had to go get stuff from Codeplex? Yeah, you know, which is a great, handy, however, who feels comfortable putting those things on in your production environment? Not so many hands, funnily enough. Are those things. We'll look at some of the scripting, workflows, scheduling tasks, you know, getting PowerShell scripts to run on a schedule. Possible? Sure. A little bit of a pain? Yeah, a little bit, you know. Who here has gotten to basically take a PowerShell script, say, great, there's a script, it works, I need this to run every day at 3 a.m. So then they go have to write the batch file that they then use to trigger the PowerShell script. Yeah, because I needed that extra step. Thank you. You know, set down some things in there, and we're going to look at all these things. Remoting, scripting tools. So we're going to have a look at all these things. And a lot of what we're going to be doing here, I'll be honest, it's, you know, if we're talking about pain points well, we need to identify what some of those, and let's look at some of the things they've done to identify these things. Commandlets and modules. Probably the biggest complaints that I hear when I teach PowerShell courses, when I teach other courses, because I'll be honest, I do a lot with Exchange, SharePoint, Link, and Windows. That's where I spend my time. All those have nice, big PowerShell interfaces, so I spend a lot of time with these things. Biggest complaints I get, and the ones that still drive me nuts, too hard to find my commandlets. You know, I'll be honest, some of that never goes away in a command line environment. You either know the command line or you don't. Hopefully you know how to use the tools. Yeah. Too hard to use. Which ones can I use? How do I get more commandlets? When I start thinking about using things in a scripted environment, how come when I open up my console, when I open up my PowerShell window, it works fine? I put the same code in my script and it bombs. Right? We have all these issues. None of which are insurmountable, but they're just issues. And especially if, you know, like I said, most of us in here didn't kind of describe ourselves as PowerShell experts. That's the stuff that makes it harder, makes it, you know, I give up. I'm going to go use something else. I'm going to find another approach. You know, how do I get more commandlets? Oh, I have to get them, I have to go get them. So they've given us quite a few things in here to help with this in PowerShell 3.0, a few different things. And we're going to have a look at these in just a moment. Hopefully you've heard of these. Show command. Anyone heard of this one? Oh, I got one hand. Oh, see, this side's doing the room very well. They've got 2 hats already. And we've got one left. So who had their hand up? There we go. Have a hat. Get that back to him. Thank you for getting that back to him. Yeah, show command. This is a useful one, especially for the casual user. Tab complete's great, don't get me wrong. Show command makes it a lot simpler, makes it a lot easier, some explanation. So look at that in just a moment. Commandlet discovery makes it a little bit easier. Some of the, basically, make it an easier, simpler way to get these things, and also basically the auto-complete is easier and faster and a little more intelligent. That's the nice thing about that. One of the things that I always like the kind of the auto-complete or the tab complete. Very, very useful, but especially when working through switches. Alphabetical or some seemingly random order. It's a little more intelligent about what we're trying to do here. So small things in here. Module auto load is your friend. Anyone heard of this one? Seen this? This is the one that makes your life a pain in the butt in your scripting. I've got this code that I've copied and I put it in, and when I go to run my script, it fails. Because, oh, look, some command, when I just fired up, depending on which version of the PowerShell window I loaded, oh, look, if I click on the one that's on my taskbar by default, okay, I get no extra modules. I get no extra sets of commandlets. So even if I'm a domain controller, those sort of things. Oh, if I want that one, I had to go through the start menu and go find in there. And then if I'm running a script, I have to figure out what module of the commands I want in my script to work. So then put a line in my script that says to load that module. Yay. Module autoload is your friend. In Windows Server 2012, we'll look at this just a second. The biggest thing we do here, module autoload. It's great. If the module's there, if I've installed the feature that has PowerShell commandlets that goes along with it, when I do things like get command, to give me a list of all the commands, they're there, even if the module's not loaded yet. So they try to find a balance. We want them loaded, but also trying to make sure the performance is there. The module will load when I need it to. So if I do, a DHCP command or an Active Directory command, it will load the module on demand. It makes it a little bit simpler. Makes it so, great, it doesn't really matter. As long as the modules are there, it'll load them. So which one I'm going to use, which shell environment is going to be a little bit simpler for me. The second thing that we're going to get there is that from a scripting perspective, it now means it's not as big an issue if you don't put that line of import module, and figuring that is. As long as you put that. Now, if you're making really robust scripts, if you're a consultant or things, you probably still want to put code in your scripts to check for modules to make sure they're loaded. If you're making things that are really portable, fair enough. If you're working in a fairly controlled environment, you know what's there and not there. It makes that a lot easier. And for those of you who are concerned about that kind of behavior, they even have given us, by default, it's turned on. I can turn that off. I really don't like that. It's called security problems. Fine, turn it off. The result of all this, and here's the biggest one, now we're looking at thousands of native commandlets to manage stuff. Probably one of the single biggest things that I saw when I heard this a couple of years ago, and I went, good. Because that was the biggest thing. Like I said, managing Hyper-V. Like I can have 100 Hyper-V machines I have to go download and register and set up. I don't want to do that, by hand if I don't have to. Same point in time, these are all, I'm working in a training environment, these are on student machines. I'm a small organization, small enough that we are not investing in like virtual machine manager, those types of things just for that purpose, especially when you have to blow away those machines every Friday. The overhead there is nuts. Hyper-V module was useful. Now it's built in. So that's the thing, And so we'll look at those things. DHCP server. Hopefully you don't need to go look at using NetSH anymore. Yeah, great, fine. We actually have DHCP commandlets. We have DNS server commandlets. We started seeing a little bit of this. I don't have to go to Codeplex so much. So that's what we're looking, the more feature-specific commandlets. So what we're doing for the next 5 hours, we'll be working through this list. What? Oh, no? Okay, or not, fine. Not so much. But, and even then, that's not an absolutely comprehensive list. That was just a real quick and dirty, all the big stuff. So hopefully you'll find something of use for you in there, depending on what you're working at. They've exposed pretty much. And moving forward, that's what they're moving for. So, to me, this is one of the things that kind of reduces, this has a big impact across a lot of these pain points. So that's probably our big ones that we're looking at here. So what I'm going to do now is just, I've talked about some of these great, I don't know, great, but they're useful. I don't know any of these things were deal breakers, but they're useful stuff. So let's just have a fairly quick look at a few of these things. All right, so obviously in all good demo things, we'll move away from this as we go on a little bit. But what I've got in here, in this case, I have a 2008 domain controller. So it has my normal stuff on there. Hopefully everyone can see that reasonably. Can everyone see that okay? Can you see it okay on the main one, or is the magnifier still desired? It's fairly good size. I'll leave it on. I'll just make sure. Basically, for example, if I'm doing, this is a domain controller, I type in get AD. I know you can't hear me, but I'm hitting tab. Now, what would you expect, domain controller, right? I'm expecting to see some things in here, but I'm just not seeing anything, realistically, And it's that normal thing, get module. So Thank you so much. You know, I mean, that's really, that's what we're seeing in here, our basic stuff in there. You know. So these are the types of things we're looking at, you know, and, you know, get command, you know, and basically get command star AD. You know, domain controller, PowerShell window, on a domain controller, but yet which of the Active Directory, you know, commandlets do I have loaded? You know, none. That's the kind of stuff that drives people nuts. You know, so those are the things that we're trying to deal with here and try to get around. So I switch over to my domain controller on my 2012. So get module. Now, obviously just so we look at here so we can see, oh, I need to scroll down just a little bit here. But you'll notice there's my list of modules loaded. The AD module is not there, correct? Get AD, what do I want? But yet I can go through all these things. You know, I'm going to shorten this up a little bit. Get AD user administrator. That's going to, oh, boom. I don't know if you saw that flash up. Did anyone see that green bar flash up? Oh, auto load on that module, thanks. So executes the command. And now, in basic now, you can now see that it loads those modules. So again, yeah. Yes, it will persist for that session. So because they're trying to find that, let's not just load all these modules you don't need, but when you run these things, it will load them. So obviously, handy in this kind of thing, it just takes some of that complexity. Why isn't it working? Also from a scripting perspective. You know, these are useful things that we can see on there. You know, that's the biggest kind of one of those biggest things you start looking at. That's useful. It's you know, earth-shattering? No. Does it make my life easier on a day-to-day? Absolutely. You know, and you know, when we look at this one, and I'm just going to do a get command here. I could type it would be useful. And you'll notice, at least in this particular domain controller, how many commands do I have there? You know, 1,500 and some odd. When did you ever see that on a Windows 2008? You know, okay, so we got 1,500 commandlets now in there. And no, again, that also goes, but you've only got 2 modules loaded. There's not 1,500. The reality is there's not 1,500 Active Directory commandlets. It's showing all the ones that are available to me. You know, realistically, for all the modules and all the features that are turned on, if I start firing up the appropriate commandlets, it will load them. So that's the kind of thing that they're looking at here. Again, I'll be honest, not earth-shattering stuff. But is it useful? Make my life simpler? Absolutely. So they've done a lot of work in this kind of stuff. And they've done some work with, like I said, the tab complete. They've tried to make that a little more intelligent. So instead of just randomly, you know, alphabetically working through things, let's put some order. And once I've chosen a command, that's the big thing, like with the new tab complete. Once I've used a switch, as I start tab complete for the next ones, it doesn't use the one I've already gotten. So they've tried to make it a little smarter. Just again. So I didn't quite guess it.
Is it working with any models or only with
All the ones that I've been testing it on in all the 2012 ones. So I can't say that I've tested every single module. I've been looking at the AD ones. As far as I understand, that should work in the VMware ones as well. Like I haven't tested any third party, so I can't definitively say that, but as far as I know, it should. All right. Now, the next thing, someone said simplified syntax, variables, all this kind of stuff. Again, you know, these are the big things. Brackets, parentheses, braces. You know, anyone here understand those fully? Yeah, that's more hands than I thought. That's good. You know, I'm impressed by that. So you know, fair enough. For those who understand it, Would you, for those who said you understood it, would you still say that it was a bit of a pain in the butt until you figured it out? Yeah, see, head's going up. For those of you who say you didn't understand it, would you still agree that it's a bit of a pain in the butt when you run into this? Yeah, if your hands, yeah. It's normal. I'll be honest. It's a command line tool. There's syntax. There's ways you got to do stuff that never entirely goes away. It doesn't. I'd love to say it does, but it doesn't. But they've tried to make these things a little bit simpler. But the reality is we don't need braces for a lot of stuff anymore, which is nice. So get rid of those braces, especially I ran the where object and the for each object stuff. Where was, the where object. So where object, $, underscore dot, that syntax, and then try to use those filters. Don't have to. Now, I should note, but I've got all these scripts, do I have to rewrite them? No. The old syntax is still supported. So if I've got scripts that are using, the syntax, happily works, happily runs, that's not a problem for you. But anyway, so I don't need the braces, don't need the $, underscore quite so much. You still need to know the comparison operators. I know sometimes that's a bit of a pain point, because especially if you're coming from other scripting languages. When I want to do equal sign, I just typed an equal sign. No, minus LT, fine, or minus EQ. You still need a little bit of that. It is backward compatible if you need to. And so to me, that's probably one of the biggest things here. And this is just simplified so much. And so when I look at some of the simplified syntax around these things, the where object and the for each object. So again, if we have a look at a couple of these things, I'm just going to do clear my screen here. So bring it down so you can see too. Like I said, the get process command is my friend. All right. So obviously get process just returns all the running processes. Now, I'm enough of a geek that I still yes, I can, you could use an alias, yes I can. But basically all I need here is working set greater than 20 megabytes. Okay, that's it. Again, obviously I still can use the where for that. Use the where command for that. And that's going to give, I've got a few apps, I've got a few things running on that. The results in and of itself aren't the big thing. But that's the syntax now. Okay, so again, if you compare that to, for those who've been doing it in PowerShell 2.0, that same command, it works, but it just looks a little different. That's what, and that's the stuff there, especially for those, again, like I said, most of you kind of self-identified, so you use it under duress, when I have to. That's the kind of stuff that I know makes a lot of people nuts. How do I, when do I use braces? When do I not have to? Now, I'll be honest, there are still points in time. Like I said, it is still a command line tool. You're going to have to use some of that syntax. You're going to still things anytime. You're going to see a lot of processes and a lot of commandlets that will have things that have a switch. It's a script block. Anytime you have those script blocks in those kind of contexts, you're still going to need some of these braces and stuff. But I find for a lot of my day-to-day stuff, this just became simpler. Okay, I'm not claiming this is earth-shattering stuff, but is this useful? Makes it just easier for me to get stuff done, easier for me to have my non-PowerShell people get stuff done and look at all these things going on there, trying to explain to them, what $ underscore means. Again, if I run that, I get the same result because it's doing the same thing. So we're looking at those types of things. One of the other new features that they've added in here that I find is really useful is if I can do this, get process. This is more for you scripters out there. No, tab complete. Take a command like a get, especially with get commands, take one of those and get process, put it in parentheses. There's list all my processes just by name. So again, if you think for those of you who've done this kind of work, and instead of, get process, format list, certain prints, if I really only need that, especially in a scripting environment, I only need that field, I can do that. I can pull just that property up. I can do that quick and simple. Again, try that in PowerShell 2.0. Trust me, it doesn't work. So those are the things we're looking at. So one of the big things they did is for some of this small day-to-day stuff, let's simplify the syntax, make it a little bit easier, make it so you can get up and running faster in your PowerShell environments. And I think for the most part, I think they've done a good job on that one. My third pain point, the third thing that at least that I find drives me nuts was object management. The reality is we have the generic object models: get item, get object, get WMI object. Who uses it? Anyone? Who here loves get WMI object? That was sarcasm in case you missed it. Just, who here has to use get WMI object to do what they want to do? Yeah, yeah. Amazing to have more hands on that one. Funny. Who would have thought, realistically? But I'll get there. So we have that. On the one hand, hey, full thread credit. Thank you, Microsoft's giving us a way to get at this stuff. But it still, again, makes it a little harder. It kind of puts it in the realm of specialist stuff. The PowerShell drives, especially drive mapping, creating drives, hooking into drives. Those were useful. A great way to navigate registries and all this kind of stuff, and that's still there. And again, the nice thing is they did give us those WMI objects in here. In PowerShell 3, a lot of this object models, the big thing there is they have dealt with that with the more commandlets, more native commandlets. So instead of trying to, how to figure out the WMI object to hook into the disk subsystem so I can get drive letters and stuff, now there's just a commandlet for that. Instead of having to use a WMI object or the ADSI object, to get into some of these things, there's a commandlet for that. So again, I'm not going to go through all those. A couple new features. For the new PS drive, for those PowerShell drives, there is now a persist switch. Okay, that's fine. Which basically now means I can use my PowerShell scripts using that switch, put a persist switch on this thing to map network drives. And those drive mappings will survive my PowerShell session. So it's pretty, it's basically, it's a replacement for net use. But hey, it only took them to version 3 to put it in. So, but it's there. So if I'm using PowerShell, as PowerShell becomes more and more your scripting language of choice, especially for your client-side devices, does this seem useful to anyone? The ability to sit there and map these things in here. And here's another one. Get child item. What do you use get child item for? What's the most common use, or at least for you, if you use it? What's your most common use of that particular command if you're someone who uses it? Yeah, traversing file systems and folders, right? Yeah, great. And it works if you know what you're looking for. They've got a couple new changes in here. One is a few new switches that make this a lot simpler for that purpose, a lot more useful for that purpose. Basically, just a switch now. So fine, pointed at get child item, pointed at something, pointed at a directory, get child item. Just do the minus directory switch, so fine, just show me the list of directories. Done. Or I just want a list of the hidden files. Now, there are ways to do this, but it usually involves, okay, I've got to go find, what was the mode? It's gone out of my head now, but anyway, there's an attribute, basically attribute, they had to go and know whether it was, and if I wanted a directory and was hidden, had to do D and H and try to figure out which slot it was in. I mean, there were ways to this. I've had to deal with enough scripts to go find these files that match these things, but yet but make sure that they're hidden, so include that in the set. So they've just done a lot of things in here. You know what? We're going to recurse. We're going to sit there and do system, read only, hidden, show me the directories. These are switches in this get child item. The other fun thing that they've done with get child item is I can basically tell it, just show me text files, and this is new. So I'm going to put it in my C drive. Say, I want to show you all the text files on my C drive. In 2.0, that was a little bit difficult because basically you had to say go point at a directory. You couldn't tell to look for text files, but you basically had to go look through each one and basically build a bit of a nested command to make that work easily. Now I'm going to say, get star.txt, get child item, star.txt, point it at my C drive, and just put the recurse switch on there. So it will automatically go through. So even if I'm not telling it to look for directories, I'm telling it to look for files, it will recurse through my directory structure. That's something that it didn't do. The only time you could use recurse before was it had to point it at a directory. So again, they've given us some useful things in here. And as we have a look at some of these things, That's probably the biggest one. I'll get child item. I'll just start there. Start at txt. I just take that back a moment. So I know I have no text files in there. So let's go get a path. If I do that, that's normal, right? Look in the directory I'm working in, look in my working directory, put a command in here, so you can see that hopefully. There we go. Get child item, txt, there's nothing there. Add the recursion switch. Let me see if I can unpin that for a moment. Come on, be my friend. And enter. I love live demos. There we go. Now it's going to take a few seconds, but now that's what we have going here. It's not done yet because obviously I'm telling it to look at my C drive of my laptop that has a whole bunch of stuff on it. But note what we're seeing here. So again, in 2.0, you have to write a little bit more complex and basically write, take a look for each one of the things, look for everything, and filter out results to find the things we're looking at. They've tried to make this kind of stuff, this type of item management and file system management, considerably simpler. I'm guessing we don't really need to see all of the text files basically on that machine. Or basically, and here's my, get child item. So show me all child items, but show me all the ones that have the hidden attribute in there. So, and again, there's one for, there's one for directories, one for hidden, one for archive. Basically there's a few of these switches. Does that sound useful to anyone? Potentially? Again, if you're trying to use this for this kind of stuff, this is a really useful thing that you're going to want to have a look at. You're going to want to explain to look at some of these things in here. So that's probably your biggest one in there. I should know the other one there is the new PS drive. Let me pull that down. Again, this is one of those things, if you haven't seen that, Q, JFIN, don't normally, that kind of thing. So there's a switch, the root, pointed at that switch. And persist. So you get a command that looks a little bit like that. So again, give it a drive letter. You do have to tell it that it's a file system drive because remember that in PowerShell, for those who are familiar with it, PowerShell drives, do they have to be the file system? No. So in this case, so it's a little bit different. Like it is the equivalent, like of that net use command, but still this isn't too bad. I can live with this, realistically. I just have to tell it's pointing at my file system. Okay, typo in there somewhere. Oh. I know why. When we talk about errors, it's still. PowerShell is still very much a no news is good news approach to error messages. If it works, you get nothing. If blood flows red on the PowerShell, there we go. No colon after the drive letter. That was my mistake. It puts that in, not you. But we start looking at these things. And again, the nice thing here is this is now a map drive. I close my PowerShell session. That drive mapping remains. So from a client management perspective on my servers, this starts to make PowerShell a more viable option. that we're looking at in here. So we start looking at, again, a few things in there that I think are going to find object management considerably simpler. Now, scripts, workflows, scripts, scheduled tasks. Now, to be fair, people said, okay, great. What do I put about PowerShell 2.0 about workflows and scripts and scheduled tasks? My first thought was I could just leave that column blank. And I don't think it would be too bad. But when it came to what were my pain points, like I said, no native scheduling. Yeah, workaround for that? Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Invoking those things were complex, and they were specifically targeted for a script in PowerShell, single computer. It really was targeted around single computers, unless you went to great lengths to do the remote management and wrote that into your script and do those types of things. And hey, that stuff works. So we can do all these things. This is an area where Microsoft has tried to put some big work in here. Things to help with this. Unblock file. Anyone heard of this one? This is a new one. It's one of those problems because who here basically says, you know what, I'm following the best practices. I'm going to make sure that only the scripts that we have that are signed are going to run. You're going to set that execution policy to make sure that it's safe. Should you do that in your production environments? Absolutely. So great. Oh, here's a script I got from the internet. And it's useful. And I've made some tweaks to it. But in a lot of cases, even after you made those tweaks to it, you try to run it, cans out. So one of the options they do have now, there's a new one here that I can use an unblocked file. So anything that's being blocked, so I can still leave my remote sign. I can remove some of those more restrictive execution policies in play, but on a script-by-script basis without having to go through and copy and paste the stuff and create a new script. So give it an unblocked file. But to me, the biggest one here is this is not the complete command set, but anything. This register and get scheduled job. And related to that, there's a bunch of jobs commandlets and job trigger commandlets. We now have native PowerShell ability to schedule and run our scripts that will hook into the task scheduler, and basically that's where these things will go. Okay, so that's the best thing we do here. Now, to do a scheduled job, it's kind of there's a little bit kind of fiddly, to be painfully honest, but I'll take it at this point in time. It's still not, what it does mean is I don't have to go and kind of do that workaround of, okay, create my script, now create a batch file that will run PowerShell.exe and run the script and then schedule the batch file. I can just schedule these things to run. And start combining these things with the auto load of the modules. This starts making my scripting environment gets a lot more attractive. The other thing is the workflows. Fortunately, in an hour-long session, you don't really have time to do a real. I could probably spend an hour looking at uses of this new idea of workflows. There's basically workflows for PowerShell now. The whole point of workflows is effectively they are types of scripts. You could definitely argue that. They're meant for long-running tasks, multi-computer management. Because they're using the hooking into the Windows workflow, there is persistence, so it means to checkpoint through them, stop and start them if they get interrupted. We can put these things, we can control these things. And if you're in a heavy developer environment, basically you have developers using Visual Studio, they can actually create these things and export them as XAML files. So you can do it in PowerShell. The ISE, the built-in Windows PowerShell ISE, understands workflows because there are some unique syntactical issues around things you can't do in a workflow because of the nature of what it's doing. But here's a fun one, especially when you're talking about long-running tasks across multiple computers. I can set these workflows to have the activities run in parallel. So I can say, do this and this and this, and that's fine. So that, again, in a strictly scripted environment, that's hard to do. / impossible. A script executes, works its way down. I can tell things, run these things in parallel, load them, fine. We can trigger these off simultaneously, especially in this idea of this multi-computer management. So to me, this is, especially in larger environments, this is going to make a big difference for a lot of people. So these are the things that we're going to be looking at here. All right, so we're going to, again, have a quick look at this so we can at least have some idea. Whoops, one too many. On there now. Switch to one of my other ones. This one looks a little bit better. Put that there. Now, kind of first things first. The first thing that I like is this idea of a scheduled job. Now, like I said, it's a little bit finicky in that to schedule a job, you need to know the code or you can know to get it to run existing PowerShell scripts. That's fine. So you need to be able to do that. You need to kind of know that. But you have to have some idea about what it is that you want to do. So you need to know the code or the script. I need to know when I want it to run, what schedule I want it to run on, and if there are any other conditions. If you've ever used the newer versions of the task scheduler, stuff that we have in there anyway, but now we want to do this programmatically when I set up these scheduled jobs. Because what's going to happen is these things are going in the task scheduler. So it needs these things. And at this point in time, the way that it basically needs to work is you do have to use a variable, sorry, but we do have the, change the screen? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I had, you'd like to see too? It was really great, and you missed it. It was an awesome. Thank you. Okay, so the big thing here, we have a new job trigger command. Okay, but then what you have to do is set that against a variable. Set that next to an object. Daily. So if you look through those, there's daily, time of week, all this kind of stuff. But daily is fine. At. And I'm just going to keep it simple, 10 a.m. And it happily accepts that. So again, if I want to get more complex, I can use a fuller number, 09 colon da 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 until 9:54 and 27 seconds if I want to. Just keep it simple. And if I really want to have options about when these things should run, so options equals new. New schedule would be helpful if I could. New schedule job option. For example, should I start this? Should I basically the option went up for the job that I'm going to set up and tell it to run? Should I start if my computer's running on battery? Yeah, sure. That's fine. Well, again, this is a little bit of planning. I need to kind of know when I want to do it. I need to know what those options are. Make some decisions on those. I can set those up. It's easiest if I set those up early because now. Where'd it go? Oh, sorry, not new, wrong one. Register. Register a scheduled job. Give it a name. And basically, in this case, if I have a file that I wanted to run, feed it the file. I'm just going to use script block. And that's one of the cases still, in that kind of syntax, I still have to use my braces. Like I said, it doesn't entirely go away, but we still get that going in there. And give it a trigger. Hold on there. There we go. And scheduled job option. Let's move it over here. And now I've got it scheduled, so at 10 a.m. it's going to fire up and run the get process command for me every day. Basically, there is an option if I need it to run. Basically, when I set up the schedule, there is an option in there to tell it to run under whatever credentials I want. Otherwise, it's going to, like in this case, it'll run on current logged on user. So, but there is an option to feed it that. So that's the thing. Now, if I really want to, the thing is, if you go start looking at the task scheduler and try to find out where is it going to, it's going to be buried. It's like buried under all the system ones. There is a Windows PowerShell option. Microsoft recommends that if you are using these things to set up this kind of stuff, use this to manage it. Yes, if you really want to in the task scheduler, you could go and look in there. I know. The reality is, obviously, return my syntax up there. There's a name. If I wanted to run this out of sequence or out of schedule, start job, definition name. That should do it. And there we go. I can see that it just ran, executed. Now, my thrilling one of just telling it, returning get process and then running didn't do anything. Obviously, a more likely syntax, you have it do something, put it to a file, write a log. But effectively, I can, if I need to, if the job's in there. There is a get scheduled jobs. There are commandlets for sit there managing, retrieving. I can see what's there. I can see history. So I can put all those things in there.
If you do this on a remote machine, how do you deal with the file?
Have to do with the files, and it really depends on, in some cases, so if you're running this remotely, it depends on how you wrote the script or how you're getting it to execute on the remote script and what you're telling it to do.
So if you pointed to a script here and say create my task, does it know to...
So the script itself is telling it to create more tasks?
No, will it cache the script file on the other end? If you want to run a script on a remote machine, see if the copy file
Again, it depends. Depends how you've done it. That's one of the things. So one of the things, if you use a workflow, no. Because basically workflow opens up commandlets that I can have the workflow script on one machine and invoke it on the computer, and it will basically execute, and I don't have to put it there. But if I am using all the traditional PS session, remote session stuff, then yeah, you can run into that. So it depends on how you're doing that. And so that's a good question. So to me, on a day-to-day basis, this makes my life easier, this kind of stuff. But yeah, like I said, if you look at the workflows, that's a little more complex. There's some custom syntax involved in that. But the nice thing about the workflows is, realistically, they do give you options, slightly different syntax, but still fundamentally a script, and you can execute those against remote machines, on remote machines, without having to put them all on there. Again, it's that bigger one, and like I said, in a crash course, we've got an hour. Can't show everything, unfortunately. There. Remoting, remote PowerShell. A little bit complex to turn on and configure. Basically, the session initiator stores the session information, and if that goes offline, your session's gone. And in some cases, a little bit hard to use outside of Active Directory and domain environments. Those are some of the pain points that I saw and that we're looking at here. So things that they've given us in 3.0, it's enabled by default. Yay! So to me, that's just the simplest one. That was a big deal. It just makes it a little bit easier. We now have this option for persistent sessions. And it doesn't matter, and it's not just stored in the initiator. So I can disconnect from a session. The PowerShell session on the one I was connected to stays live, and you can connect to it either from the local machine that it was being hooked up into, or I can reconnect to it from my other service. So it means I can basically say, great, do a remote PowerShell session. Here, run this script, run this command, do something. Hey, maybe it's going to take a while. I can completely shut down the computer that I started the session from. Come back later, turn it on, and hook into that. And they've also given us an option to help us if you are using those defined. Anyone have issues with trying to do remote PowerShell sessions, and when someone had set up they bring it, pop in a network, and they just find it as a public network, not a domain-based or a private? They've given us some switches to help with that. The intent there is for client management. Because on clients, if someone plugs in a laptop, is this a work or a public? And I've ran into this. They say public, all of a sudden I'm trying to do remote things and it doesn't work. Because it lock those things out. All right. So those are the things that we look at here. Again, So if we look very quickly at this, and this is probably your big one here. Enable. Now I'm just basically taking the shortcut. But basically, I just fired this up this morning. There's no persistent. It's just on. Well, again, if you've got scripts that are saying turn this on, that's fine, but it's turned on by default, Windows Server 2012, basically PowerShell 3, Windows 8. So this makes that much easier, especially in a domain-based environment where I don't have to, where I'm not having to worry about credentials and authenticating and that kind of stuff. All that stuff's being taken care of. That's going to help. Let me go from here. So, and if I want to take advantage of yeah. So new PS session. See, Okay, so I've got my session in there, and hook into that one, and another script block. Okay, so again, I can still run all these things, and that's fine. So that works. They made it simple. We have a remote session on there. Okay, and so I've disconnected from there. I know, simple stuff. Now again, in the old days, what happens? Real estate in the old days being, a week ago, or a few months ago. The reality is, or if I, what happens if I shut down my PowerShell window? In PowerShell 2.0, I shut down this PowerShell window. What happens? You basically, we're done here in terms of remote session. I can, and I can still happily do this. Now, where is my? And what do we see? Switching over to that domain controller, I still have a running disconnected PowerShell session. So now if I really want to, if I want to see, especially I had something that was running or what was going on, I can actually from here, I can connect into that session from the local machine, see what's going on. If I want to, I can go back to the other one and reconnect up to this session. That's something, again, from a larger management perspective, this becomes useful. Yeah. Yeah, eventually. Yeah. So they put some things in there. But yeah, effectively, and there are also the commands to kill the sessions as well. But effectively, so especially from management, I don't know, I guess, who's done these things, put Post-it notes on screen saying, don't close this PowerShell window? Because there's something running on the back end? Yeah. That's not as big an issue anymore. Fine, I can happily do this. Fine, shut down the other one. And to me, that's a useful thing. Again, maybe not on the small, but in your large environments, like stuff, this is useful. Just makes things a little bit simpler, a little bit easier to manage. Now, last but not least, the PowerShell ISE. I'll be honest, a lot of people told me that the layout of that was confusing. The built-in one that came in PowerShell. I didn't mind it too much, but enough people say, I find that confusing. I'm going to take their word for it. So go for that. Inconsistent autocomplete, no syntax help, very little of that. These are all things that they have tried to address in the ISE for PowerShell 3.0. A couple, obviously, they've made the IntelliSense useful. They've given us the ability, they now have code snippets built in, and there is the ability to create your own code snippets. So that's a very, very handy thing. And some just general editing enhancements, trying to make it a little bit easier, simpler and easier to put in here. Now, I'll just bring that up. Yeah, hold on. So just waiting for it to come up. So now that I've got this in here, actually. So simpler, fairly simple things in here. Where's that gone? So I'm just going to pull this up a little bit. There we go. Pull this one down. Don't really need the magnifier for this too much. We see a few things over here. Hopefully you can see this. Over here on the right-hand side, this idea of commands. I'll be honest, this is a basic command. It's the show command window. I can actually use this even from a generic PowerShell window. Just do show command. And it brings up a window where I start typing in a command. Get process. I pick it. And again, very good. So that's one thing I was telling you about before. It makes it useful if I'm not that familiar, if I can kind of find it, tell me what my switches are, computer names, IDs, file version, module, and when you hover over, it gives you some basic hints and basically some basic help around that. Obviously that's built into the shell. We now have a full console in here, and I can very happily, if I really want to, great, run in the console. So they've just made it, because that was one of the things, you had the kind of the command window that, just show the console. They've tried to simplify the UI a little bit. The ability to sit there and add snippets. There are a bunch of built-in snippets. So anywhere I'm hitting Control J, here's a bunch of code blocks, like for each blocks and that kind of stuff. So that's the built-in ones. Some of your more complex constructs, they've built these into the ISE. The code, the IntelliSense. Snippets. Oops. Yeah. Basically the IntelliSense part of these things. So, get printer, fine. And if I do choose that one, if there are any options in there, I can put those things. So again, I'm not earth-shattering stuff, but is this a much more usable scripting tool? The reality is, who here said they had bought third-party scripting tools? How many of them used not much more than probably what's now included? I'll be the first to admit, you pay some good money for some of the scripting tools, and really I wanted snippets, I wanted better syntax, better autocomplete. To be honest, I think Microsoft's delivered on that. And for me, as what I would call myself the sometime scripter anymore, this is enough for me. I think if I'm spending all day, every day writing scripts, I'm still probably looking at some of those third-party tools. But having said that, I think they've done that. They've done a really nice job in the ISE. I think it's a much more useful tool. So if you're spending your time there, I know I do a lot of work, especially with complex stuff that I could just do in the console. I just do in the ISE now and get it to execute because I can track and I can run through. They give us some better debug stuff in there as well. So that's what I've got for the day. So we're coming up in here. Now, like I said, so most of you said you were here. Why? Because we heard they're giving away laptops. We kind of are. I'm giving away half a laptop. Don't ask me why. I just I'm told. Or half a laptop. Basically, the other half, there is a question in two parts. The answer to the other part of the question will be found in the WSV 304 session that's running this time tomorrow. So basically, you want the laptop? You got to basically answer both of them. So after Raj's session tomorrow, he's one of my colleagues. Basically, you need to remember part one, and Raj is going to have this in here. It says Raj is going to need to use PowerShell commandlets in the Hyper-V and failover clusters modules. True or false? Raj will need to manually load them in every script he writes. Okay, so that's my part. That's my contribution. So you have to answer that question, true or false. Now, what you'll need to do, within 30 minutes of Raj's session tomorrow, you need to tweet your answer with the hash TENZ and both of our course tags in there. Basically, we will choose a winner will be chosen from any correct answer we get within the 30 minutes after Raj finishes. Such a thing. So you get half a laptop on this one here. So good luck with that. Yeah, if you want to take a picture on that one. So thanks for that. In terms of related content, there's lots of stuff. There are lots of sessions in here that I don't have all of them out there that have PowerShell content. If you have questions, you can feel free to contact me. I will also be at the Certification Center, Epsom Room 3, running exams, get certified, woohoo. And there's also, especially around PowerShell, TechNet, and MSDN, TechNet especially, Heaps of resource there. Definitely worth your time. Thank you for your time this morning. Have a good session. And remember to fill in your evals. There we go, free fall. Done.